A wolf finds a baby in a car accident, takes it into the forest, and the unimaginable happens in the darkness of the woods. The silence was broken only by the sharp sound of the wind and the distant howl of a wolf. Suddenly, the violent screech of skidding tires and the metallic crunch of twisting metal echoed on the deserted road. A car had lost control on a dangerous curve, flipping multiple times before stopping at the edge of the forest. The headlights still flickered, faintly illuminating the tragic scene inside the wrecked car. A family lay unconscious. The father and mother, both strapped in their seatbelts, were motionless, and in the back seat, strapped into a baby car seat, was a child around 2 years old, quietly crying. The rain began to fall, making the scene even more desolate. From the heart of the forest, a majestic gray wolf watched everything from a distance. He was the leader of his pack, but that night he was patrolling his territory alone. Curiosity and instinct led him to the edge of the road, drawn by the scent of metal and blood. Slowly, he approached the car. His bright eyes scanned the vehicle's interior, fixing on the small figure that was still moving. The baby was crying, its wide, frightened eyes reflecting the fading headlights. The wolf took another step forward, sniffing the air. Something within him, a primal instinct, urged him to act. He wasn't just any predator. There was something profound and mysterious in his connection to the life of that baby. With surprising caution, the wolf circled the car, moving closer to the broken window. Their eyes met, and in an instinctive motion, he gently bit the handle of the baby's seat, pulling it out of the car as if he knew exactly what to do. The baby stopped crying, as if it somehow sensed it was under the protection of something beyond its understanding. The wolf, with an almost unbelievable gentleness, carried the child as he would his own pups and began to enter the dense forest, moving away from the accident site. The rain grew heavier, but that didn't stop the wolf from taking the baby deeper into the heart of the woods, where something unimaginable was about to happen. The path was steep and covered in thick vegetation, but the wolf moved with purpose, as if each step was guided by an ancient instinct. He knew every tree, every sound. The baby, wrapped in its thin blanket, was safe in the jaws of its unexpected guardian. Its wide, curious eyes observed the shadows around, and small murmurs escaped its lips, almost inaudible under the sound of the rain. Finally, they reached a clearing where the rest of the pack sheltered. The leader wolf gently placed the baby on the ground. The other wolves approached, perplexed and cautious, forming a circle around the child. Some growled softly, recognizing the human scent, but the gray wolf, with an authoritative gaze, quelled any sign of threat. With a brief howl, he ordered them to back off, creating a protective barrier around the baby. There, under the constant watch of the wolf, the child found an unexpected sense of safety. Meanwhile, in the nearby village, news of the accident began to spread. No one knew that deep within the forest, the baby's fate had taken an unbelievable turn under the protection of a wild guardian who, on that rainy night, became much more than just a simple wolf. The baby's parents, gravely injured, were rescued by a passerby who found them at the scene of the accident. However, the little one, still strapped in the car seat, had disappeared, leaving everyone in a state of shock and worry. The search began immediately, with the police, firefighters, and local residents joining forces. Everyone believed that alone, the baby had no chance of surviving for long in such a hostile and wild environment. Among those who volunteered was Samuel, an experienced hunter with deep knowledge of the forest. He knew every trail, every hill, every river in that woodland. But Samuel knew something that no one else seemed to consider. A pack of wolves inhabited those lands. That night, hearing the distant howls, he began to suspect that somehow these animals might be involved in the baby's disappearance. Determined, Samuel committed himself not only to finding the child, but also to ensuring the safety of the village if a wolf threat was confirmed. As the search continued and time passed, something extraordinary was happening in the heart of the forest. Against all odds, the baby seemed to be adapting to this new reality. The gray wolf, the pack leader, guided by a protective and paternal instinct that no one could explain, fed the baby with what he could hunt. He brought small pieces of meat to the child and helped him eat in the best way he could, ensuring the baby had enough strength to withstand the cold and danger. On chilly nights, the wolf lay beside the child, wrapping him with his body to keep him warm. It was a scene of pure instinct, but one that revealed a tenderness that defied logic. The baby, in turn, began to interact with the wolves as if gradually feeling part of this wild family. He smiled at the animals, tried to mimic their sounds, and impressively, even the wolves who initially showed distrust began to accept him. To them, this little human, vulnerable and dependent, was now part of the pack. Over time, the baby grew accustomed to the wolves' routine, snuggling close to them and observing their movements with childlike curiosity. It seemed he understood that, there among the wolves, he was safe. Samuel, guided by his suspicions, followed tracks that led him deeper into the dark forest. With each step, he found wolf prints around areas showing signs of recent activity, but he could not locate the baby. His concern grew, as did his determination to find the child before it was too late. Winter was approaching, making the forest even colder and more inhospitable. Samuel knew time was running out, and the tension between him and the rescue team only grew. Some team members had already come to believe that finding the baby alive was impossible, while others, like Samuel, refused to give up. The urgency of the moment only drove him further, guided by an inexplicable force. On the third night of the search, as a mist blanketed the forest with a cold, oppressive shroud, Samuel drifted away from the group, driven by a mix of desperation and pure instinct. The farther he went, the stronger his feeling that he was closing in on something. Then he heard a sound that sent chills down his spine, a deep, prolonged howl echoing very close to him. His heart raced, but he didn't hesitate. He followed the sound, cautiously moving toward a clearing. In the distance, he saw moving shadows, large and powerful, circling something on the ground. Instinctively, he hid behind a tree, gripping his rifle tightly as his eyes adjusted to the dim light. The scene unfolding before him seemed impossible. At the center of the pack, protected by powerful wolves, something was moving on the ground. Samuel, unable to look away, tried to make sense of what he was witnessing, hardly believing the sight before him. There, in the center of the clearing, was the baby, alive and protected. Surrounded by the wolves, the pack's leader, the imposing gray wolf, stood watch beside the child, vigilant like a protective father. A shock ran through Samuel. What he had feared as a wolf threat now seemed to be the very reason the baby was safe. Samuel found himself standing between two worlds, the human world awaiting the rescue and the wild world where, in a mysterious way, the baby had found protection. He knew that if he advanced, he might frighten the wolves and put the child's life at risk. At the same time, he feared that if he didn't act, the baby wouldn't survive much longer in such a hostile environment, even with the wolves' protection. Confused and with a heavy heart, Samuel withdrew quietly, determined to plan his next step carefully. Aware that the search team leader would never believe his story, Samuel realized that a reckless approach could lead to tragedy. He needed to find a way to gain the wolves' trust, but, being a hunter and a villager, this seemed impossible. Meanwhile, the baby's life alongside the wolves continued to adapt. The gray wolf, who had initially acted out of pure instinct, now seemed to develop an even deeper connection with the child. Over several nights, the wolf fended off other predators lurking around the clearing, protecting the baby with his life. The other wolves, who had already accepted the boy as part of the pack, even played with him gently, as they would with their own cubs. Each day, the bond between the wolf and the baby grew stronger, and the child, still too young to fully understand what was happening, began to feel trust and affection for his savior. The gray wolf showed a rare kindness, almost incomprehensible for a wild creature, as if he understood that the fate of the defenseless baby rested in his care. However, on one particularly cold night, the silence of the forest would be drastically disrupted. A group of villagers, ignoring all of Samuel's warnings, decided to invade the forest. They were convinced that the wolves were responsible for the baby's disappearance and, gripped by fear and anger, believed the animals had done something tragic to the child. Determined to eliminate any threat, the men set out, armed and ready to hunt down any wolf they encountered. When Samuel learned of the hunters' movement, a deep fear seized him. He knew those men would show no mercy. He feared that, if they encountered the wolves, something terrible could happen not only to the pack but also to the baby, whom he knew was under the gray wolf's protection. So, without hesitation, Samuel ran toward the heart of the forest. His heart raced with every step, and a sense of urgency overtook his senses. He was well acquainted with the hunter's disposition and impulsiveness. They wouldn't hesitate to shoot at the slightest movement, the smallest sound. The group advanced through the dense forest, breaking branches and illuminating their path with powerful flashlights. Each man carried a rifle, and their faces showed the resolve of those ready for confrontation. After a long walk, they finally spotted the clearing where the pack had gathered. The wolves, alerted by the scent and sound of the intruders, immediately went on high alert. The wolves began circling around the baby, who lay on the ground, protected by the barrier of wild bodies. The gray wolf, the leader, positioned himself at the front of the circle and with a menacing growl, bared his sharp teeth, warning the men to keep their distance. The hunters, who hadn't imagined that the baby was alive and under the wolves' protection, raised their weapons, ready to fire. The tension was palpable. The silence of the clearing was broken by a desperate shout. Samuel had arrived, and without hesitation he shouted for the men to stop. His voice echoed through the forest, strong and resolute, halting the critical moment. For an instant, everything seemed to freeze. The wolves, their eyes fixed on the hunters, remained in a defensive stance, growling and sniffing the air, ready to protect the baby at any cost. Samuel, breathless, raised his hands and cautiously approached the group of hunters, trying to calm them. He knew that every second was crucial, that any sudden movement could trigger a tragedy. He felt he was walking a fine line between saving the baby and preventing a deadly clash between men and wolves. One of the hunters, with his finger on the trigger and wide-eyed, shouted, "Samuel, get out of the way. These wolves are going to kill us all." The tension in the air was nearly unbearable, and Samuel knew that a wrong response could be fatal. With a steady gaze and a voice full of conviction, he replied, "You're wrong. These wolves are not our enemies. They're protecting the baby. They saved his life." The hunters looked at each other, confused and incredulous, unable to grasp what Samuel was trying to explain. The idea that these wild wolves, feared by everyone in the village, were actually caring for a defenseless child seemed absurd. But Samuel, determined, continued, "Look closely. They've formed a circle around him. They're protecting the baby, not threatening him. They could have attacked him, but they chose to protect him as part of their own pack. We need to stay calm, or any rash action will put the baby's life at risk." The leader of the hunting group, still hesitant, slowly lowered his weapon, unsure of what to do. The clearing was silent, except for the low growls of the wolves and the tense breathing of the men. The struggle for understanding played out there, on the border between the human instinct to dominate and the wolves' unexpected loyalty. Samuel's eyes, fixed on the hunters, conveyed an urgency that could not be ignored. After what felt like an eternity, the men began to lower their weapons, still perplexed and incredulous, but now reluctant to defy Samuel's warning. With a final sigh of relief, he stepped forward, trying to gain the wolves' trust without provoking further tension. As he did so, he approached the gray wolf, who held a steady, penetrating gaze but no longer growled. The fate of the baby, in the quiet clearing, was still at stake, but the first step toward peace had been taken. Confusion and fear were evident in the hunters' eyes. None of them could comprehend the situation, a human baby being protected by wild wolves. The tension hung thick in the air, each second growing heavier, and everyone knew that any false move could lead to irreversible disaster. The leader of the hunters reluctantly lowered his weapon for a moment, but the others still hesitated, fingers poised on the trigger, suspicious and uncertain. Then Samuel, in a bold move, took a step forward toward the wolves. He knew he was risking his own life, but he also knew that if he didn't act, the baby and the wolves would be doomed. Slowly, with a firm and calm voice, he spoke directly to the gray wolf, trying to convey a peace that could overcome the tension of the moment. "I know you understand," he whispered, his eyes locked with the wolf's. "I can see it in your eyes. You saved this child, and I just want to help." The gray wolf, though still wary, seemed to recognize the sincerity in Samuel's calm voice. For a moment, his eyes shone, as if he understood the human's intention. With one last look at his pack, the leader wolf stepped back, allowing Samuel to approach the baby. In a slow and careful motion, Samuel picked up the child in his arms, cradling him tenderly. The hunters, unable to believe what they were seeing, began lowering their weapons one by one until none were left raised. Absolute silence filled the forest, and they all stood there, watching in awe and admiration at the miracle that had just occurred. The gray wolf, though keeping a safe distance, did not take his eyes off the baby, as if still ensuring his safety. Samuel, feeling the weight of responsibility and the urgency of the moment, turned to the group and spoke with determination. "We need to leave now. If we return with reinforcements, they'll kill the wolves, and that wouldn't be right." The hunters, still shaken and bewildered by what they had just witnessed, began to argue among themselves. Some, held by old grudges, wanted revenge, remembering times when the wolves had attacked livestock on their farms. Others, however, visibly moved by the scene, questioned their beliefs. These same wolves they had once feared had protected a defenseless child. It was impossible for them to ignore what they had just seen. Yet the inner debate within each of them revealed the complexity of the situation. Samuel, with the baby safe in his arms, knew this was a night no one would ever forget, a meeting between the wild and the human worlds where, against all odds, an unexpected alliance had been forged. And in that moment, as the gray wolf watched from a distance, it seemed the forest itself breathed in peace, aware that something profoundly significant had occurred in that clearing. Samuel, sensing the need to take control of the situation, took a breath and spoke firmly to the other hunters. "If we return and tell this story, no one will believe it. But you saw what I saw. These wolves saved a life. They are not our enemies." Determined to protect both the wolves and the child, Samuel led the group back to the village, the baby still safe in his arms, wrapped in the mantle of the forest that, on this night, had revealed one of its deepest secrets. The journey back was long and tiring, but the thought of reuniting the baby with his family filled their hearts with hope. In the distance, the gray wolf, keeping a respectful distance, followed the group, still vigilant, as if he wanted to ensure the little one's safety to the very end. The silent shadow of the wolf made the return even more mysterious and moving, a scene that would forever remain in the memories of those who witnessed it. When they finally reached the outskirts of the village, news of the rescue spread like lightning. Soon, the villagers gathered, astonished, as they heard the extraordinary tale of how the baby had been found alive and well, protected by a pack of wolves. At the hospital, the parents, still recovering, could hardly believe their child was alive. Tears of relief and gratitude flowed as they held their little one close, thanking everyone who had brought him back, unaware of the improbable bond between him and the wolf that had guarded him. As the doctors tended to the baby, and the voices of celebration echoed through the village, Samuel slipped away to a quiet corner, away from the commotion. He knew this story would become a legend in the community, something passed down through generations, but for him, what truly mattered wasn't just the miraculous rescue of the baby. It was the improbable and profound bond that had formed between the gray wolf and the child. There, under the stars and surrounded by the murmur of the forest, Samuel felt a strange peace as he reflected on everything that had happened. This encounter with the wolves wasn't just a survival story. It was a reminder of the mysterious connection between man and nature. At that moment, Samuel knew that his own life would never be the same, that he would always carry with him the image of the gray wolf protecting the baby, a lesson in trust and compassion that, even between such different worlds, had defied everything he thought he knew about instinct and survival. The forest, which Samuel had once seen only as a place of hunting and danger, now revealed itself as a sacred sanctuary, a space where wildlife followed its own laws and mysteries. He knew that the gray wolf would never be just an animal in his eyes. There was something extraordinary about that being, an unforgettable presence that Samuel would carry with him forever. At that moment, he faced challenges not only external but also profound internal conflicts. The decisions he was making now were heavy and challenged everything he believed. Samuel chose to protect the wolves, even knowing it would put him at odds with the prejudices of his fellow hunters and the villagers. His transformation from a wary hunter to someone who now respected and understood the animals was at the heart of this entire experience. More than a story of survival, it was a journey of overcoming the fears and biases that surrounded him. In the days following the baby's rescue, Samuel felt a growing restlessness. Deep down, he knew that the bond he had witnessed between the gray wolf and the boy was something more profound than mere animal instinct. Finally, he decided to complete the circle and return to the forest. This time, his intent was not to hunt, but to see again that wolf who had changed his life. He felt the need to thank the animal and perhaps better understand the mystery surrounding him. So, he went to the place where the accident had occurred, with a mix of reverence and anticipation. The forest enveloped him in a deep silence, broken only by the soft crunch of dry leaves under his steps. And then, a chill ran down his spine. Samuel knew he was not alone. From among the trees, as if sensing Samuel's call, the gray wolf emerged silently, his piercing eyes fixed on him, observing with an almost human depth. Samuel looked back at him with a mix of admiration and respect. Without looking away, he murmured softly, "I knew you would come." And at that moment, as if he could truly understand him, the wolf remained there, silent, gazing at him. It was as if they shared a silent understanding, a mutual respect that transcended language or any barrier between the wild and the human worlds. "I didn't come as a hunter, I came to thank you." Samuel's words echoed through the forest as he kept his gaze fixed on the gray wolf, who stood motionless. There was an inexplicable peace in the animal's stance, as if he truly understood Samuel's intent. Respectfully, he took a few steps back and made a silent bow, ready to leave. But before he could turn and continue his way, the wolf let out a soft howl. It was a gentle sound, yet it carried deep meaning. The message was clear. The bond between them would not end here. As Samuel walked back to the village, he was met by a group of excited villagers discussing strange events in the forest. Recent reports indicated that other wild animals, once hostile, were now displaying calmer behavior, as if the presence of the wolves had brought an invisible harmony to the area. Intrigued, Samuel followed the villagers to a clearing where a group of researchers was gathered. These scientists, who had been studying the local fauna for years, appeared perplexed and were discussing the inexplicable phenomenon unfolding before them. When one of the researchers noticed Samuel's presence, he approached with a serious, curious expression. "You were involved in the story of the baby, weren't you?" asked the scientist, his eyes fixed on Samuel, as if he knew he held a key piece to the puzzle. "We need to talk," the researcher continued. "We've discovered something remarkable. The gray wolf is more than just an animal. It seems he exerts an unusual influence over the other animals in the area, something we can't fully explain." Samuel remained silent, absorbing each word as the researcher continued. "The presence of this wolf seems vital to the balance of the ecosystem here. It's as if he were an essential link, a silent guardian that keeps everything in order. We believe the gray wolf plays a fundamental role in preserving this environment." Samuel, who had witnessed the wolf protect the baby and now heard about its influence over the forest, felt a wave of admiration and reverence grow within him. This animal, once feared and misunderstood, revealed itself to be a vital force, a symbol of harmony and protection. The journey he had started as a hunter now led him to a deeper understanding of the mysterious bond between man and nature. Taking in all the information, Samuel realized that the gray wolf was not only a protector of the baby, but a true guardian of the forest itself. With this new revelation, he found himself faced with a difficult decision. Many hunters and villagers still saw the wolves as a threat, especially after years of clashes with the animals. Samuel knew that if he didn't act quickly, the gray wolf and his pack could be in grave danger. Determined to save those he now considered essential to the forest's balance, Samuel organized a meeting in the village. In front of everyone, he shared what he had discovered about the wolves and their positive impact on the ecosystem. He spoke with conviction about how they had saved the baby and their crucial role in the forest's harmony. However, not everyone was willing to listen. Fear and distrust still lingered among many villagers and hunters, reluctant to accept Samuel's perspective. In the midst of the discussion, the baby's mother, still emotional and grateful for her child's life, stood up and with a firm voice declared, "If it weren't for these wolves, my child wouldn't be alive today. They are not our enemies." Her words, filled with sincerity and gratitude, resonated among those present, touching the hearts of the community. One by one, the villagers began to reconsider, and eventually they agreed to suspend the wolf hunts. Even the hunters, though reluctant, decided to respect the majority's decision and give coexistence a chance. With peace restored between the villagers and the wolves, the forest flourished as never before. Samuel took on the role of the region's informal guardian, dedicating himself to educating the community on the importance of coexisting in harmony with nature. He was now seen as the defender of that fragile bond between man and the wild. The gray wolf, keeping his distance, was sometimes still spotted by villagers, always majestic and enigmatic, like a mystical figure that had become part of local lore. Samuel's relationship with the forest had changed forever. He dedicated himself to protecting wildlife, seeing nature as an ally and no longer as an enemy. Now, every time he looked toward the trees, he knew that somewhere among them, the gray wolf still watched over him, silent and vigilant, maintaining his mysterious presence. If this incredible story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming exciting videos. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell to receive all notifications. And if this journey of friendship and respect for nature moved you, leave a like. We'll see you for more adventures and stories here on our channel. Until next time.